Hello and welcome to Joe's Curve Shack. I'm Joe, and today let's talk about that first reptile show you're headed to tomorrow. Well, what are some of the questions you should be asking if you buy anything from a vendor at this show? These are the things we're going to talk about in today's video. Alright, let's get into it. You're walking into the expo, you're looking around, you see all these neat creatures, enclosures, etc. Now you walk up to one of the vendors' tables and you see all sorts of creatures. Tarantulas, centipedes, scorpions. It's just like, wow. Alright, and you find one that you like and you want to buy it. Do you know the questions you should be asking that vendor to protect yourself from getting a bad purchase? All right, one of those would be, is it captive bred or wild caught? Now, the pros and cons for each are like, okay, if it's captive bred, you're not depleting a species in its native habitat. You're rewarding someone that's captive breeding them, putting all the time and effort into it, and bringing a creature to an expo that is most likely disease free, parasite free, bacteria, and knows exactly when it was born, how old it is, etc. Now, wild caught, none of that's happening. You don't know if it has diseases, you don't know if it has parasites, you don't know how old it is. It could be dead tomorrow and you're not none the wiser. But that vendor, some of them are a little unethical and they might sell you a bad critter. So ask your questions. Cover your bases. Get the info. What does it eat? How often should I feed it? How big of an enclosure should I put it in? There are many questions. And all right, you're home now with your critter, and you have those questions that everybody always comes up with after the fact. And you're like, what do I do? Well, if the vendor was a reputable vendor, and most are, they will have written the scientific name on the enclosure. Like Titius stigmurus, a Brazilian scorpion. Well, that is your golden ticket to information. The common name, that's a dime a dozen, and often it gets construed with the wrong species, and that scientific name is just really what you need. Okay, once you have that scientific name, though, you can go to Google or YouTube and punch up all this information and videos on that species and answer those questions. So don't worry. And don't worry, you're not the first one to get home and go, I got all these questions. Well, we all have done that. It's common. Okay, another thing to start considering is the environmental conditions of your home versus where that creature is native to. So, with that scientific name, go and punch it in and find out, where is this creature native to? What as its species adaptations become based on those conditions? Okay, so you Google that area, find out, say it's the Titius stigmurus, and you find out, okay, it's from Brazil, it's from this specific region, and you can go on Google Maps and you punch that in, you can get an idea of what is in the area, and then you can go to like a weather app and punch in the specific names of a few different cities or townships, whatever, and find out what your seasonal temps are, highs, lows, humidity, UV index, all that. You can get an idea of what you're dealing with. Another thing you can do when you have that, you can do like Google Earth, and then you can see what the terrain looks like. Is it really rocky? Is it really sandy? Is it very fertile farm soil or something? Or is it like a tropical forest soil? So you can figure out what kind of soil you need to use. And then you can also see the vegetation. You can see kind of how things are laid out. rocks and twigs, and and that'll help you kind of design a enclosure that mimics the location from where they're at. And that's always kind of the most rewarding part about keeping these critters is you can kind of reproduce that environment, and kind of it's almost like you're imagining it as you're watching them in their native environment, say in Brazil or Africa or wherever. And that's pretty cool. So you'll wanna do your homework. You'll wanna figure out as much as you can, and you never have enough knowledge about these creatures to mitigate any future risk. Another thing I want to talk about that's a common theme I see is you'll hear, like for scorpions, oh, just spray the corner of the enclosure with some water, and that'll be enough for their water needs. Well, only problem with that is whoever's saying that most of the time, depending on where they are and what their environmental conditions are, that might not work for your environmental conditions. It's like for myself, I live in a place where it's kind of high desert, and if you cut a tree down and cut it into firewood, it would be dry in 3 months, ready to throw into the fireplace, and you're just fine. But say you're on the coast or Florida, Louisiana, something like that, and you did the same, that would might not be ready for a full year. So you can see the evaporation factor is something to really think about. So one thing I do to mitigate risk of dehydration for my critters is, even though most say, hey, you don't need a water dish, I'll put a water dish in their enclosure, and that helps mitigate the environmental factor and how fast that water is evaporating, how fast they're going to need water. And that's really helpful. All right, let me show you some water dishes. There's this little guy, and then there's this little guy. But you might be asking, those don't look small enough for a baby tarantula or a baby scorpion. They're pretty small, right? Well, here's your DIY moment. It's pretty easy. With this little guy, you're just going to take a pair of tin snips or real sharp scissors and just go like that. Then you got this little itty bitty water dish. It'll barely hold a little rock in it, a little singular rock. And then you have the slid. Well, let's cut off the outer threaded rim, just like so. Tin snips really work pretty well. Scissors might be a little hard, but you'll get the idea. Okay? So, there we go. You might. Alright, now I've shown you a couple really easy DIY water dishes. One made out of the vial that your scorpion or baby tarantula might have came in, and then a simple water bottle cap from your grocery store. Just by cutting off the rim, you get this nice shallow little water dish, and you put a little aquarium gravel in it, a singular rock in the other, and you've got a water surface when you put a little couple drops in there that your scorpion or tarantula will be able to drink from and avoid that dehydration if the situation arises where a thermostat fails or something. Now, let's talk about the next thing. All right, let's talk about a temperature gauge. You can buy temperature gauges on Amazon or Google Marketplace, whichever, that will be Wi-Fi and Bluetooth capable, and they will then link to a free app that you can get for your phone. And those then come with a function built in that will allow you to set a high and low temperature and get a notification if either that low or high is exceeded. And that'll be a really good way to mitigate any uh-oh moments when a thermostat or heating pad fails and starts turning your enclosure into a sauna. So that's really good. Okay, let's move on. All right, you finished setting up your enclosure for your new critter. You've got all the scenery, you got it all set up, you got temp gauges, you got all the water bowls, everything done. All right, now you're looking over and you're seeing this deli cup of, say, some red runner roaches or dubia roaches or, say, some banded crickets that you got at the expo as well for food. Well, most of the time, the vendors put those crickets, roaches, and all that in those containers from big, huge totes prior to you showing up to the expo. So that's kind of what you want to also put them in order for them to reproduce, thrive, just be healthy, etc. So you can get those sort of totes at, like, say, your Home Depot or your Lowe's, and they're sealable. Nice brands are available. Now, what you can do is you can get some of those vents that you'll find in the plumbing and heating section of the store that are metal screen, and you might have to drill some larger holes in the tote and silicone it in place. But you'll have a secure tote that none of these roaches or anything are going to get out and get you in trouble with your landlord or your better half. Well, here we are at the end of the video. I hope you liked it. I hope it answers some questions, giving you some ideas on how to proceed once you buy that first pet at the expo. At this time, if you could take a moment to like and subscribe, and then add your comments down below for like species specific videos you might want to see, or enclosure you might want to see reviewed, or other ideas that you might have. Well, till the next thing, this is the Career Shack, and I'm signing off for the night. You have a good one. Bye bye.